And that happened a lot. Leslie was a woman who was Filipino and Caucasian, and she was really upset because when she started school, her mother filled the questionnaire out and never asked her and put down Filipino. Her mother was a Caucasian and put down Filipino. She says, why did my mother ask me what I wanted put down? Karen is a respondent who, she's talking about as an adult. She's Caucasian. Her father was from Germany, and her mother was Korean. Her mother was a Korean War bride. And her university insists, that what she teaches at the university, insists on listing her as Asian. You know why? Because it lets them put that they have X number of Asians who work with the university, and the university she teaches at happens not to be a university like Wayne. It's a relatively isolated university in a primarily white area, and they want to be able to put a few people in their minority box, and she's great. Oh, you got to go down as Asian. Anita was Puerto Rican and Mexican. Now, oh well, Hispanic, right? Not if you talk to Anita, because she says Puerto Rican culture, Mexican culture are very different. Okay, so they both speak Spanish. They don't even speak Spanish the same. Both of them think the other one has a very funny accent. And she doesn't want to be called Hispanic. And she was dark-skinned, and she was often mistaken for African American. So people were always telling her, you're not identifying yourself right. She had a very favorite cousin from the Mexican side of the family. She happened to identify, I'm sorry, I got it wrong, from the Puerto Rican side of the family. She happened to identify as Mexican. And she loved to go places with this cousin because he was a lot of fun. So we invited her to come to a party with him. And before they went in the party, he said to her, forget the Mexican side while you're there. Okay? So here's her favorite cousin telling her that she has to forget the part of her that means the most to her. Ken was half a dozen different things. You can't check them all. But to him, that's his identity, is all of them. And it's even true of many, quote, Caucasians. Regina was a woman, I'll go into her later, but Polish and Brazilian. And she was constantly being, well, you don't really fit where you want to. She looked Polish because biologically that's what she was. But she was a refugee after the Second World War, and she grew up in Brazil. So she spoke Portuguese from living in Brazil. And people wouldn't accept her as either Portuguese or Brazilian because of her language, because she didn't look it, nor did they accept her as Polish, which she considered herself because that was her ancestry. And Sarah was a multicultural person, and people were constantly, all of them complain. They're always telling me that they know better than I do who I am. And this is the dominant society. Some of these people don't identify with these original cultures. They want to be just American. But if you look ethnic, it doesn't work. I'm going to give you two examples. One I've already talked about. This is Sam, Irish and Italian, who kind of looks Italian. Another one I call Ida, and she was British background and Lebanese background. And she kind of looked Lebanese. So both of these had somewhat darker skin. And wanted to go with, all right, I'm an American. I don't really identify with any of these. They were constantly being, but you really aren't really, so tell us what you really are. The city or town. Strauss, many years ago, said, classification and evaluation of members is usually, if not predominantly, public concerns. So, who we are and how we're classified, this is a sociologist talking, is not your choice. We, society, gets to tell you. And so, society, the community, gets to decide what matters. Let me give you two separate examples. Robert was a mixed background person, but it was two white ethnic groups. And he grew up in a town in Kentucky. And talked to him about how it felt to be mixed background. And he said, it didn't matter. Because in my community, if you were white, nobody cared what kind of white you were. And this is his quote, black and white, that's what it was. And you were either in the black box or you were in the white box. And so as far as he was concerned, it didn't matter. Derek, he was white. Derek was black and Caucasian. He was the product of an African American and a German war bride. And he had lived on military bases and in Washington, D.C., and all his life. That's where he grew up. And so he grew up in the relatively racially integrated environment of government centers like military bases. And he didn't perceive a lot of discrimination against him as a mixed racial person. On the other hand, he had relatives who grew up in Louisiana in the normal community, and he said they had overt acts of discrimination, and they had rather malicious attacks upon occasion. But he remembered living on a base in Texas where he said race wasn't important there. In our area, it was the Mexicans. So the community decides which groups we're going to go after in our community right now. And that's what Strauss said. Community decides. You don't. The individual doesn't. Families don't. Communities decide who gets treated how. I've already told you about Karen. She was Korean and Caucasian in a small white town that she grew up in, and she said there were constantly reminders that they were Asian. And she kept saying, kids aren't very nice. I hear people complaining about kids, and they say, kids are bullying today. Why are they doing that? It's as if somebody just invented bullying. Hello? I don't think there's a person in this room that can't remember. My God, I'm 74 years old. I remember kids being bullied in my grade school. It's not a new invention. The only thing that's a new invention is that we got a lot of more sophisticated ways of bullying kids today than we used to. We used to have to say it to their face. Now we can put it on the internet and they can read it all over the world. And that's a different way of bullying. But kids are not very nice. And also, I hear people say, why are kids doing that? Have you listened to their parents sometimes? Where do you think they got it from? People bullying. It's not just kids. So she complained about constantly getting ethnic slurs passed their way. And she says the fact that we were half Asian instead of whole Asian didn't really matter. She had a stepbrother. It's an unusual situation. Her father's relative had a little boy who was younger than she was, who was full Caucasian. I mean, he was born of a Caucasian marriage. And the parents couldn't take care of him. So her parents adopted this little boy. And he grew up in their Asian-Caucasian family. And guess what? He thought he was Asian-Caucasian too. And one day he was playing on the, I believe it was the Sunday school play yard. And they were making fun of the Asian kids. And he got really mad. And she says, here's this little boy who is, remember her father was German, very typically German looking, little blonde boy with a really light hair and a really white skin and blue eyes. And he says, you're always making fun of us because we're Asian and that's not right. And all these kids looked at him and said, you're not Asian. Imagine the impact on this little boy to find out that not only is he not Asian, but he's not part of the family that he considers his family.